Before I continue my Neuro-Death series, let me give some validation to Digibro's theory. He has a great point in the beginning of his video where he says,
I ask you, what exactly is an introverted person? Is it someone who doesn't like to be around other people? Or is it someone who struggles to find people that they like to be around because there are so few that they can connect with? Maybe I don't like being around my friends, or maybe I don't have the right friends. Either way, introversion is a behavioral symptom, not a cause.
what Digi's getting at is there's sort of a lack of origin as to the why. So people think, I don't like hanging out with friends, that means I'm introverted. Well, if you ask, why don't I like hanging out with my friends? Many people might answer, because you're introverted. It's this sort of like self-fulfilling cycle, right? You know, I don't like hanging out with my friends. It makes me introverted. Why don't I like hanging out with my friends? Because I am introverted. This is a cycle of nonsense, right? Where's the origin? Truly, though, why don't you like hanging out with your friends? That's the question. So we have MBTI, which is a measure of personality, right? Right? And personality is essentially your brand of behavior. We take your behaviors as a whole and we diagnose, we give it like a label, right? You're introvert. You generally don't like hanging out with your friends. That means you're generally introverted, right? That's your brand of personality, right? But Digi's like, all right, what causes the behavior though? The cause is your thought process. That's the why. And neurotyping is trying to answer the how that thought process works with two key axes, which are the what. There might be other axes, which is something Digi has admitted, but these are the two he came up with. Linear to lateral and lexical to impressionist. Linear to lateral is essentially the amount, well, lexical to impressionist is essentially how much of your thought has been codified. Linear side, we have single trains of thought. Essentially, there's not a lot going on in your head, which leads to sort of straightforward communication. Now, I don't like to think that they're linear and lateral people, just linear lateral modes of thought. Sometimes, you know, you're more in a linear state and sometimes you're more in a lateral state. It depends on what you're doing. On the lateral side, we have multiple trains of thought. You know, so you got a lot going on in your head, which kind of leads to this indirect sort of jumbled communication where you're hard to understand. Then we have codified thought, lexical to impressionist. On the lexical side, we have ideas that have been codified and, you know, which makes them symbolized, right? This is usually in language, but it doesn't always have to be. On the impressionist side, we have uncodified, which leads to unsymbolized ideas. Lexicality can be measured thusly: your ability and your need to codify ideas into symbols. Now, your ability and your need are not necessarily going to be the same, right? You might need ideas to be codified into symbols in order for you to operate, but you might not be very good at it. And you might be very good at codifying ideas into symbols, but you might not need to do that. Nonetheless, they both fall under the net of lexicality. At 1 minute and 47 seconds in, Digi makes this strange statement.
A lexical thinker will only understand things which can be put into words, refusing to acknowledge understandings which haven't been codified.
So he's saying lexical thinkers will only understand ideas that have been codified into specific language, but they won't acknowledge ideas that have been uncodified. The only problem is, how do you acknowledge something that hasn't been codified? If it's not codified, it doesn't exist and you're unable to talk about it in a setting. So no one can acknowledge something that hasn't been codified, because to acknowledge something is to codify that something. At 1 minute and 57 seconds in, Digi gives us his rundown of impressionists.
Non-lexical or impressionistic thinkers, on the other hand, might understand things but struggle to put them into words and find other methods of communication preferable.
So impressionists can understand ideas. They just struggle to put those ideas into specific language or symbols. Impressionists prefer non-verbal communication. Now, Digi doesn't lay out what this non-verbal communication is. Perhaps he means things like body language, but we'll figure that out as we go along, right? That's it for this video. Next time we'll start getting into the descriptions of each of the 16 types, starting with bookkeepers. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you again next time.